An earthquake measuring 6.1 on the Richter scale struck the island of West Java on Tuesday, destroying dozens of buildings, including houses and some schools. The quake struck in the afternoon, with the epicenter located 81 kilometers southwest of Lebak. According to the National Disaster Management Agency, a total of 13 houses were damaged in Banten Sarang district and 4 others in West Java province. So far, there have been no reports of casualties. Amnesty International accused Mexico of forcing Central American migrants to return to their home countries despite death threats in violation of national and international law. The human rights organization said Mexico's National Immigration Institute had turned back migrants from Honduras, El Salvador and Guatemala, including those whose lives are at risk. Under international law, Mexico is obligated to provide many of these people with protection from the risks they carry if they return to their home country. A regional Latin American group has criticized Venezuela's decision to hold a presidential vote by the end of April. The Latin American group, called Lima Group, has said in an election held under the present conditions would lack legitimacy. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro said he would run again if the ruling Socialist Party asked him. Demonstrators carrying signs read "NAFTA hurts all workers" protested against the latest round of meetings to modernize the NAFTA trade agreement in Montreal on Tuesday. Officials opened a key round of negotiations to modernize NAFTA. United States, Canada and Mexico are trying to revamp a 1994 pact that the US president has frequently threatened to abandon. A double-car bombing in the East Libyan city of Benghazi has left at least 22 people dead and 30 wounded, including senior security figures. The first explosion struck outside a mosque on Tuesday in Benghazi's central Al-Salmani district as worshippers were leaving evening prayers. Some 10 to 15 minutes later, after security and health officials had arrived on the scene, a second blast was detonated from a car parked on the opposite side of the street. It is not clear who is responsible for the attack. Russia has proposed that the UN Security Council create a new inquiry into who is to blame for chemical weapons attacks in Syria. The United States slammed this move as a bid to distract from a French initiative to target perpetrators of chemical strikes. In November last year, Russia ended an international inquiry into chemical weapons attacks of Syria. On Tuesday, dozens of countries agreed to work to preserve evidence and impose sanctions on those responsible. Dozens of protesters marched on Capitol Hill, where they demanded bipartisan action to protect dreamers, people who were brought to the United States illegally as children. Several protesters said they were frustrated by inaction both on the Democratic and Republican sides to grant them protection. Several protesters were detained by U.S. Capitol Police. The protest comes a day after the U.S. Congress approved a temporary spending bill to end a 3-day government shutdown with any clarity on immigration policy. Thousands of anti-capitalist protesters marched through Zurich to demonstrate against a planned visit by U.S. President Donald Trump to the World Economic Forum annual meeting. Trump is due to speak on 26 January at the WEF meeting in the Alpine town of Davos, an annual meeting of global business and political leaders where protests have been banned. 2,000 flag-waving demonstrators marched towards Zurich's financial district, where bankers had been warned to stay clear of the approved demonstrations. Pakistan's police arrested a man suspected to be a serial killer responsible for the rape and murder of a 7-year-old girl. The police identified the rapist and murderer as 24-year-old Imran Ali. According to the police, Imran Ali has confessed to Zainab's murder and his DNA matched samples found on her body. Police found Zainab Ansari's body in a garbage dumpster in Kasur district near the eastern city of Lahore last week, 4 days after she was reported missing. Residents of the area have said the murder was the 12th such incident in a year, setting off fears of a serial rapist killer on the loose. Peru has announced that it was extending the deadline for Venezuelans to apply for temporary residence until June 2019. For the past few days, long lines of Venezuelans have queued at Peru's Foreign Affairs Ministry to apply for the permit, whose term was set to expire on 23rd January. Venezuela has the largest of reserves in the world, suffers from a deep recession, shortage of basic goods and inflation, which has plunged the government of President Nicolas Maduro into a severe political crisis. Bolivian President Evo Morales began his 12th year in office by swearing in just 2 new ministers out of 6. The president has led the landlocked nation for 11 years, and last year his political party asked the courts to rescind legal limits barring elected authorities from reflection indefinitely. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that the country's nuclear agency has proposed building a nuclear power station in Argentina. The Russian president made this announcement after talks with Argentina's president and Russia have signed a memorandum of understanding to boost uranium exploration and production in the South American country. Argentina already generates 5% of its electricity with 3 heavy water nuclear reactors. The country plans to start building 2 new nuclear reactors in the second half of this year at a cost of $13 billion, most of it financed by Chinese organizations. Let's move to national stories from India. Prices of petrol and diesel touched a record high in India. Petrol and diesel prices rose to rupees 80.10 per litre in Mumbai. This is the highest in the country. Commuters were exasperated by the rise in fuel prices. India has the highest retail prices of petrol and diesel, which account for about half of India's refined fuel consumption. A fishermen's association has claimed that a group of Indian fishermen were chased away by Sri Lankan Navy for alleged poaching in the island nation's waters and threatened at point-blank range. Reportedly, the Sri Lankan Navy hurled stones at nearly 2,000 Indian fishermen and snapped the nets of 50 boats. India shares an expansive oceanic border with Sri Lanka without any perceptible demarcation, and fishermen on both sides ignore rules while netting their catch. The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea states that fishermen who cross the territorial waters can be warned and fined but not arrested. Security has been beefed up across Uttar Pradesh after Intelligence Bureau inputs warned that terrorists might slip in from the porous Indo-Nepal border and try to create trouble on the Republic Day. Special advisory has been issued to at least 16 districts including Meerut, Muzaffarnagar, Varanasi and Aligarh. American singer-songwriter Neil Diamond has announced a sudden retirement from touring after being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. The solo artist, who's incidentally turned 77 today, has had to take the decision midway through his 50th anniversary tour with quote-unquote great reluctance and disappointment. Having sold over 130 million albums worldwide over his 5-decade career, Diamond is set to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award at this Sunday's Grammys. He hopes to continue writing and recording in the near future. Hundreds of mourners gathered to pay tribute to cranberry singer Dolores O'Riordan as she was laid to rest in her native town of Ballybricken near the Irish town of Limerick. This 46-year-old musician was discovered unresponsive in a hotel room in London on the 15th of January. In addition to her family and friends, O'Riordan's funeral has been attended by all members of her band, the Cranberries, as well as the President of Ireland, Michael D. Higgins. The memorial service ended with iconic Cranberries song, When You're Gone. Disgraced comedian Bill Cosby made a surprise stand-up appearance in Philadelphia earlier this week, months ahead of a retrial into numerous counts of sexual misconduct against him. The 80-year-old has been out of the public eye since 2015, when his comedy career was shaken, with dozens of women accusing him of sexual abuse going back decades. Cosby's unexpected performance was delivered at the La Rose Jazz Club in Philadelphia's Germantown neighborhood. His second sexual abuse trial is set to begin in April. Now, sources close to Netflix have revealed that the streaming giant took a hit of about $39 million from the fallout of the Kevin Spacey sex abuse scandal. Rampant sexual abuse charges on the Oscar-winning actor had seen Netflix bring down its blockbuster show House of Cards after axing Spacey from all its projects. Spacey's axing also meant the shelving of a biopic titled Gore, which too featured the 58-year-old and was in post-production. The losses incurred over the Spacey saga, what was otherwise a blowout quarter for Netflix, where the company added a record 8 million new subscribers.